The Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire, was founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BC. It was the largest empire at that time in history, stretching from the Balkans and Egypt in the west, much of Western Asia, much of Central Asia in the northeast, and the Indus Valley in the southeast. The inhabitants of Iran, who called themselves Aryans, contrasted themselves culturally and linguistically with those of Turan, called Turyas. Despite this perceived distinction, both groups descended from early Iranian-speaking peoples. The First Persian Empire fell due to Alexander the Great's victories between 334 and 331 BC. However, Alexander's empire fell apart shortly after his death. Alexander's general, Seleucid, took control of Iran, Mesopotamia, and later Syria and Anatolia, creating the Seleucid Empire in that territory. Around 238 BC, the Parthian, the nomadic Iranian tribe from the Turan, invaded and captured Parthia, the northern region of the Seleucid Empire. In the subsequent Seleucid-Parthian Wars, during 238 BC to 129 BC, the Parthian Empire defeated the Seleucid Empire and annexed its territory. The Parthians adopted the art, architecture, religious beliefs, and regalia of their culturally heterogeneous empire, encompassing Persian, Hellenistic, and regional cultures. Compared with the earlier Achaemenid Empire, the Parthian government was notably decentralized. Territories overseen by the central government were organized similarly to the Seleucid Empire. They had a threefold division for their provincial hierarchies: the Parthian Marzban, Satrap, and Dispat, similar to the medieval Margrave and governor of the Roman Empire. Cities within the empire enjoyed a degree of self-government and paid tribute to the king. The semi-independent seven great houses of Iran, also known as the seven Parthian clans, followed the king in the power hierarchy and supplied soldiers and tribute to the king. Minor nobles followed them and were called deacons. Below came the merchants, artisans and peasants. In foreign policy, the Parthian Empire was the eastern sworn enemy of the Roman Empire, and it limited Rome's expansion. The Parthian armies included two types of cavalry, the heavily armed cataphracts and the lightly armed but highly mobile mounted archers. However, the Parthian army did not know how to besiege fortifications. The end of the Parthian Empire came at last in 224 AD when the empire's power had loosened. Ardashir, the local Iranian ruler of Persia, defeated the previous king of Parthia at the Battle of Hormozgan on April 28, 224 AD, and founded the Sasanian Empire. Although Ardashir ended the Parthian Empire in 224 AD, branches of the Arsacid dynasty continued to rule for centuries in Armenia, Iberia, and Caucasian Albania. The Sasanian Empire was characterized by a complex government bureaucracy and a preference for Zoroastrianism as a legitimizing and unifying ideal. Sassanid rulers took the title of Shahanshah, King of Kings, becoming the central overlords. They also assumed guardianship of the sacred fire, the symbol of the national religion. The head of the bureaucracy was the prime minister, who was named the Wuzurg Franadar. The head of the Magi, priests of Zoroastrianism, was one of the most powerful government officials. The districts of the provinces were governed by what were called Sharab, and a chief priest called Mubd. Mubeds, who were Zoroastrian clerics, also dealt with legal matters. The Sassanid nobility was a mixture of old Parthian clans, Persian aristocratic families, and noble families from subject territories. The bulk of the high nobility included the powerful Parthian noble families known as Wuzurgan, who were centered on the Iranian plateau. They served as the backbone of the Sasanian feudal army and were largely autonomous. The Sasanian Shah and Shahs had noticeably little control over the Wuzurgan, whose vast possessions were semi-independent states controlled by independent ruling families, but they were nominally subordinate to the Shahanshah. Although Iranian society was highly militarized, it had a much smaller and poorer population and a less centralized state than the Roman Empire. As a result, the Sassanid Shahs had access to fewer permanent fighters and instead relied on recruits from the semi-independent nobility. Nevertheless, at its height in 620, the Sasanian Empire controlled all of modern-day Iran and Iraq, parts of the Arabian Peninsula, the Caucasus, the Levant, and parts of Central Asia and South Asia. In 488, nobles led by Sukra, a member of the Parthian Karan clan, one of the 7 great houses of Iran, who had played a key role in the previous Shahanshah's deposition, appointed Kavad I, at the age of 15, the new Shahanshah of the Sasanian Empire. Kavad inherited the empire in critical condition. The economy declined due to drought, famine, and crushing defeats inflicted by the Hephthalites during the Hephthalite-Sasanian War of 484. Not only had they captured most of its eastern provinces, but they had also forced the Sassanids to pay them a considerable tribute, which strained the Shah's royal treasury. Revolts were occurring in the western provinces, including Armenia and Iberia. At the same time, high taxes made the country's peasant class increasingly restive and alienated from the elite. Kavad wanted to end Sukra's dominance and found an ally in Shapur of Ray, the powerful nobleman from the Myran clan and a determined opponent of Sukra. As a result of their union, Sukra was executed, which caused discontent among some prominent members of the nobility, weakening Kavad's status as ruler. Shortly after Sukra's execution, Kavad's attention was drawn to the Mobad named Mazdak. Mazdak was the leading exponent of a religious and philosophical movement called Mazdakism. Mazdak's movement was non-violent and called for sharing wealth, women, and property. Probably, Kavad adopted the Mazdakite doctrine to break the influence of the magnates and the growing aristocracy. The nobles were unhappy with this movement and resisted it. As a result, the dissatisfied were executed, but these nobles were the principal warriors of the Persian cavalry, which was the army's core. Shahanshah Hormizd IV continued the killings of nobles, and he ordered the death of many members of the Zoroastrian clergy, including the high priest. Zoroastrian priests were highly educated people whose advice was sought by many government officials and the Sassanid Shah and Shahs. The murder of many priests, as well as their flight from repression, significantly undermined the ability of the Sassanid government to make sound political decisions. Some later historical sources report that Hormizd IV executed around 12,000 nobles during his reign, which strongly decreased the Persian army's strength. In 627, during the Third Perso-Turkic War, the Byzantine army under Emperor Heraclius decisively defeated the Sassanid army in the Battle of Nineveh. After the battle, the son of the current emperor, Khosrow II, staged a coup d'état and executed his father and all his brothers. As a result, a chaotic Sasanian civil war of 628 to 632 broke out, in which the most influential members of the nobility gained complete autonomy and began to create their governments. In 632, the Sassanid Empire was significantly weakened when Yazdegerd III ascended the throne at age 8. The young Shahanshah did not have the authority necessary to ensure the stability of his vast empire, which was rapidly disintegrating due to constant internal conflicts between army commanders, courtiers and influential members of the aristocracy, who fought and destroyed each other. Many of the empire's rulers declared independence and created their kingdoms. The Sasanian Empire was seriously weakened by these internal conflicts, leading to the Rashidun's conquest. The Shahanshah spent much of his reign fleeing from one province to another in the vain hope of raising an army. Yazdegerd met his death at the hands of a millionaire Merv in 651, ending the last pre-Islamic Iranian empire after more than 400 years of rule.